What is a concussion? Possibly football's most insidious injury, concussions have become one of the most prominent and fearful injuries that players face. A concussion is the result of a large force battering into a player's head, which launches the brain into the skull, causing swelling and bruising to the brain. These instances typically occur during big hits where the head is the main point contact. Headaches, fatigue, and irritability are serious symptoms of concussions and can last for multiple weeks. Yet, despite significant symptoms, concussions do not sideline players like a torn ACL or a sprained ankle would. Concussions have for decades been viewed as simply headaches. In the early years of football's creation, the sport's violent nature caused large amounts of uproar due to the gruesome injuries that players often suffered. The medical community and community leaders accused the game of being unsafe and in some cases attempted to ban people from playing. Both mental and physical injuries were known to occur, but most of the worry was focused on the physical injuries that players suffered with immense frequency. Brain injuries were ignored due to their invisible nature and an overall lack of knowledge about the brain. Early rule changes and increased padding were implemented in order to curb some of the more physical injuries, and as a result, football survived these initial criticisms. The violent nature of the game remained intact. The National Football League, in the meantime, exploded in popularity and importance as football transcended its status of just a sporting event to a cultural event. The NFL embraced the masculine brutality of the game, as fandom for football became centered around its bone-crushing hits. Advertisements for the league depict heads butting into each other and also prominently displaying the big hits that not only send the crowd wild, but also are the source of many serious injuries. The league's focus on the brutality of the game was and has been tremendously successful, as the annual championship game, the Super Bowl, is one of the most televised events. Football has transformed from just a mere sporting event to a mega-cultural event, and a huge moneymaker, as 30-second advertisements cost millions of dollars. Yet the questions regarding the safety of football started to gain steam in the late 1990s, as more and more players were sidelined by concussions. However, the NFL quickly dismissed these claims, calling concussions a pack journalism issue, and claiming that concussions were not a danger that players faced. Mike Webster. The case of Mike Webster would forever change the way that football and brain injuries were viewed. Mike Webster played center for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he fit perfectly into the gritty, blue-collar mold of the quintessential football player. Yet, after his immensely successful 14 years, his life crumbled apart. He drastically changed from a cheery person to an individual who had violent outbursts, major memory lapses, and in general could not function.
No, I'm talking about... No, I'm just trying to find... Yeah, well, trauma, everybody went through trauma as a kid. I'm not saying I was different than that. I'm just saying... the things we do to one another, okay? Hell, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just tired and confused right now.
He became hooked on prescription drugs as his marriage failed, and he was forced to live out of a car for the end of his life. Webster died at the age of 50 due to his career in NFL. His subsequent autopsy further revealed the extent of his physical injuries with cracks in his feet, varicose veins, torn rotator cuffs, large amount of scar tissue on his skull, but it also revealed hidden damage to his brain. A brain autopsy revealed that Webster had a rare mental disease known as chronic traumatic encephalopathy, CTE, in his brain. CTE is a neurodegenerative disease that is characterized by the buildup of tau proteins in the frontal lobes and hippocampus of the brain that leads to the atrophy of brain cells and the overall brain itself. The disease results in memory lapse, depression, irritability, aggressive behavior, and dementia in more advanced stages.
The wake-up call was, Deanna and I were talking recently, and she was talking about Breeley, our youngest, playing soccer. I don't remember her playing soccer. She played right over here.
The disease is caused by repetitive brain traumas, such as concussions, events that occur with immense frequency in football. Webster's diagnosis with CTE was shocking, as it was the first real link that illustrated that playing football could cause long-term mental illness in its players. However, the NFL met these claims with hard-swept denial. The idea that football was the cause of long-term mental illness could potentially be catastrophic for the NFL, with many parents potentially not allowing their children to play the game. As a result, the NFL viciously fought back against any findings that stated that football caused long-term mental issues in its players. The Mild Traumatic Brain Injury Committee was created in the mid-90s by the NFL with the goal of backing research that showed that football was not dangerous to the mental health of players. However, the committee was deeply flawed, with a half of the individuals on the committee being team-employed doctors and the head of the committee not having any background in neuroscience. The committee published multiple papers that emphatically denied any link between football and the possibility of long-term brain damage. When Webster's case of CTE was published, the committee attacked the paper and even called for the paper to be redacted. In a 2007 interview, Dr. Ira Kassan summarized the NFL's take on the events in an infamous interview, saying,
"Is there any evidence, as far as you're concerned, that links multiple head injuries among pro football players with depression?
No.
With dementia?
No.
With early onset of Alzheimer's?"
No.
But the NFL's stance of denial would be increasingly questioned as more former players began to show increased symptoms of brain damage. Webster's death and diagnosis with CTE started a cascade of former NFL players dying prematurely and being diagnosed with CTE in the mid to late 2000s. Justin Strelzik, Ken Stabler, Dave Duerson, Frank Gifford, Andre Waters, Chris Henry, Tom McHale, Ray Easterling, Tyler Sash, Junior So, and countless others died prematurely due in part to the insidious effects of CTE. These individuals, often major former stars, all suffered similar falls from grace, as many fell victim to substance abuse and/or committed suicide. Their careers in football had devastated not only their physical bodies but also their minds. Additionally, during this time, more and more studies emerged that began to paint a much clearer picture of the risk that NFL players put their brains through. Studies connected concussions in football with higher rates of depression, Alzheimer's disease, and dementia in former football players. Boston University, which became the brain bank of former football players, examined the brains of deceased football players and found that 90 out of the 94 tested brains were confirmed with CTE. Even more jarring was the discovery of full-blown CTE in college and high school level football players. The evidence showed that there was indeed a strong connection between football and mental disease. Roger Goodell, CEO of the NFL, was called to Congress to testify about the NFL's response, or lack of, to the growing concussion crisis. Congresswoman Linda Sanchez compared the NFL to the big tobacco companies, a comparison that would spur change into how the NFL viewed concussions. In 2009, after aggressively denying the link between concussions and long-term problems, the league admitted that the link was quite obvious from the medical research. Additionally, the NFL settled with the thousands of former NFL players who had sued the league for medical compensation to the tune of over $1 billion. The league also began to take a more proactive nature against concussions as they donated millions of dollars to various research institutions that were looking in depth into concussions and other diseases such as CTE. In attempts to limit the risk for concussions that players face while playing the game, the league also instituted a multitude of rule changes, such as penalized head-to-head hits, which are a major cause of concussions. Concussion spotters were added into the league in recent years and are independent medical doctors who have the ability to take players off the field and test them for concussions. The league has changed rapidly from a league of denial to one of acceptance and attempting to make an inherently violent game safer for the players' long-term health. Yet, for many, these changes are too little too late. The rule changes do not alter the violent base of the game, and on every play of every game, there's a large risk for concussions, which has made the game questionable for many fans, and especially parents who have become increasingly hesitant to allow their children to play. Documentaries such as Frontline's 2013 League of Denial, The NFL's Concussion Crisis, and Will Smith's 2015 movie, Concussion, have shed an uncanny light on the NFL's blind denial of the impact of concussions and have made many question the league's recent intentions. Questions have also been raised about the effectiveness of the preventative measures put in place by the league as concussions have remained a common injury suffered by players. But amid all of this criticism, the NFL and football have remained very important to the American